Have you ever felt like the world has turned its back on you? On a cold, rainy night, a man named Daniel walked alone through empty streets. The wind was biting, his stomach ached with hunger, and a profound loneliness wrapped around him like a shroud. No one saw him, no one seemed to care. He stopped in front of a brightly lit restaurant. Through the glass, he saw people laughing, toasting, and enjoying delicious meals. The warmth inside was a stark contrast to the cold rain that mixed with the silent tears on his face. It felt as if he were invisible, a ghost in his own city. This man, Daniel, wasn't always this way. He once had a loving family, a successful career, and dreams for the future. But life, in its cruelest form, had stripped him of everything. A devastating accident took his wife and daughter. The grief was unbearable, and soon after, he lost his job. His home, once filled with laughter, fell silent, and that silence eventually pushed him onto the streets. That night felt different. It felt like the end. The cold had seeped deep into his bones, and he could no longer feel his hands. His body trembled uncontrollably, not just from the cold, but from exhaustion. His soul was tired, so tired, and it just wanted to rest. He was ready to give up. But sometimes, just when all hope seems lost, a tiny flicker of light appears. At the very end of the street, Daniel spotted a small, humble diner, its sign flashing Sabor and Sear. The name meant flavor and company. He hesitated, but the magnetic pull of warmth and the scent of fresh coffee drew him closer. As he reached the door, the aroma of warm bread wrapped around him like a long-lost embrace. Inside, a young waitress named Clara was wiping down the counter, getting ready to close. When she looked up and saw him, soaked and shivering in the doorway, her heart sank. His eyes weren't just empty, they were hollowed out by hunger and desperation. Clara paused for a moment. Society has its rules, its cautions, but the raw humanity in his gaze spoke a language louder than any words. "Wait a moment," she said softly, her voice kind. She disappeared into the kitchen and returned a few minutes later with a steaming plate. It was a simple meal. Rice, beans, a piece of meat, and a warm loaf of bread, but to Daniel, it was a feast. "Please," she said, gesturing to a small table. "Sit down. It's cold outside." Daniel, filled with a mix of shame and gratitude, tried to refuse. He mumbled that he had no money, that he couldn't pay. Clara just smiled gently and replied, "Not everything worthwhile needs to be paid for with money." He ate slowly, each bite a revelation. It wasn't just food that filled his stomach. It was warmth, it was kindness, it was a feeling he thought he had lost forever. With each spoonful, the ice around his heart began to melt. Tears welled up in his eyes, but this time they weren't tears of sorrow, they were tears of gratitude. In that simple, selfless act, Daniel found something more valuable than any meal. He found hope. Before he left, he looked directly at Clara, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," he said. "You have no idea what you just saved." She just smiled, completely unaware of the profound weight of his words. She thought she had just fed a hungry man. In reality, she had rescued a soul from the brink. The next morning, Clara arrived at the diner for her shift, expecting another ordinary day, but something was very different. Parked right in front was a sleek, black luxury car. Out of it stepped a man she almost didn't recognize. It was Daniel Butt transformed. He was clean-shaven, dressed in an impeccable suit, and his face held a serene, confident expression. Clara stood there, completely speechless. Daniel walked up to her, his eyes shining with a newfound light. "Yesterday," he began, "you gave me more than just a plate of food. You gave me a reason to keep going." He then shared his story. Before tragedy struck, he had been a highly successful businessman, the owner of a large chain of restaurants. The loss of his family had shattered his world, and he had let everything crumble around him. But her kindness, that single act of compassion on his darkest night, had reignited a spark within him. For the first time in years, he felt the desire to rebuild, to start over. Daniel held out an envelope. "Consider this a thank you," he said, his voice steady. "But it's also a job offer. I want you to come work with me. I'm rebuilding my company, and I need people like you by my side, people who see the human being first." Before judging their appearance, tears streamed down Clara's face as she accepted the offer. And just like that, a story that began on a cold, desolate night transformed into a new beginning. It became a story about empathy, about second chances, and about the incredible power of a simple, kind gesture. Because sometimes a plate of food, a warm smile, or a look that says, "I see you can do more than just change a life," it can change too. As Daniel looked up at the sky that morning, the sun was finally breaking through the clouds, its warm rays spreading across the city. And he smiled, knowing that even on the coldest, darkest nights, a single act of kindness can light a fire that not even time can extinguish. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that we hope will inspire and uplift you. We'll see you in the next video. In a quiet corner of the city, as rain painted streaks on the window panes of a small diner, a young waitress named Clara was finishing her shift. The clock hands were creeping toward midnight, and the streets outside were empty, hushed by the downpour. Clara moved through the diner with a familiar weariness, wiping down the last of the tables, her thoughts drifting far away. She often dreamed of a life beyond these four walls, a life with more color and less struggle. But despite her own hardships, she had never lost the gentle kindness that her mother had instilled in her. Her mother was gone, her father a distant memory, and Clara had learned early on that the world could be a cold place. Yet she held on to one belief, that kindness was the flame that kept humanity warm. Just as she reached for the light switch, a figure outside caught her eye. A man was walking slowly, drenched by the rain, shivering in the cold night air. He looked lost, his steps heavy with a sorrow that Clara recognized deep in her own soul. For a moment, she hesitated. It was late, and she was alone. But then she saw the despair on his face, and a feeling she couldn't quite name stirred within her. Taking a breath, she opened the door, letting a gust of icy wind rush in. "Sir, are you all right?" Her voice was soft, a small ripple in the vast silence of the early morning. The man stopped, looking at her with wide, surprised eyes, as if he couldn't believe he was being seen at all. I'm just passing by," he stammered, a hint of embarrassment in his tone. Just then, a faint sound broke the rumble of his empty stomach. It was barely audible, but in the stillness of the diner, it echoed loudly in Clara's heart. Without a word, she turned back inside. She grabbed a plate of leftover food, warmed it up, and set it on a clean table. "Please, come in and sit," she said gently. "It's too cold to be out there." The man looked at the plate, then back at her, his voice barely a whisper. I can't pay for this." Clara offered a small, genuine smile. "Then pay me with a thank you. That's worth more than you know." He sat down, his movements hesitant. As he began to eat, silent tears started to trace paths down his tired face. Clara watched from a distance, giving him his space, her own heart aching with a shared sense of loneliness. In that quiet diner, two solitary souls found a moment of connection, a shared silence that spoke volumes. When he finished, he slowly stood up and straightened his worn-out coat. "No one has looked at me like that in a very long time," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." Clara just smiled, having no idea that this simple act of compassion was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change her life forever. The man walked back out into the rain and disappeared into the night. Clara stood by the window, a strange feeling washing over her, a sense that something truly important had just happened. The next morning, Clara arrived at the diner to find the sun finally breaking through the clouds. But what really caught her attention was the sleek black car parked right out front. The door opened, and the same man from the night before stepped out. He was clean, dressed in a sharp suit, and the lost, broken look in his eyes had been replaced by a calm serenity. Clara froze, her hand on the diner door. He walked towards her, holding an envelope, a gentle smile on his face. "Yesterday, you helped a complete stranger," he began. "You gave me food, but you gave me something much more valuable. You gave me hope." Clara stared, confused. He continued, "My name is Daniel Moreira. I once owned a successful chain of restaurants. But after I lost my family, I lost my will to live. I lost everything. What you did for me. It reminded me that there is still good in this world." He held out the envelope to her. Inside was a letter and an employment contract. "I want you to come work with me. I'm rebuilding my life, and I need people like you by my side. People who do good without ever expecting anything in return." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, streaming silently down her cheeks. This was it. The chance she had been dreaming of, the hope she had been clinging to. She accepted, her heart pounding with a mix of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. As Daniel turned to leave, she looked up at the bright sky and whispered, "Thank you, Mum, for teaching me to never stop believing." On that cold, rainy night, two broken souls had crossed paths. Clara, who knew how to heal with kindness, and Daniel, who desperately needed to be healed. It's a beautiful reminder that sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways, bringing together those who need each other the most. It shows us that even on the darkest of nights, a single act of kindness, a small flame of compassion, can be powerful enough to light the way back home. Thank you for watching, and if this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that inspires. We'll see you in the next video. The storm was relentless that night, each drop of rain tapping a lonely rhythm against the diner window. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and a man stood there, hesitating on the threshold. His clothes were torn, his body trembled from the cold, and his eyes held a weariness that went bone deep. He looked at me, his voice a fragile whisper, "Miss, do you happen to have any leftover food?" For a second, the world stood still. All I could hear was the rain and my own heartbeat. I was alone, it was late, and my first instinct was to be afraid. But then I looked closer. I saw his pale face, his soaked shoes, and a pain in his eyes too deep for words. This wasn't a threat. This was a soul on the very edge of breaking. Taking a deep breath, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Please come in. Sit down for a moment." He stepped inside slowly, as if he wasn't sure he was allowed to exist in a place that still held warmth. The smell of coffee and baked bread filled the air, and I saw a flicker of something in his expression. Was it hope? I walked over to the counter, my footsteps echoing in the empty room. I grabbed a plate, a piece of bread, and the last bowl of soup from the evening service. I placed it in front of him. My voice was softer this time. "Eat. It's still warm." He looked down at the bowl, his eyes welling up with tears. I can't pay you," he stammered. I managed a small smile. "Then pay me with a thank you. That's enough." He nodded, picking up the spoon with trembling hands. With every bite, it was like life was slowly returning to him. The desperate hunger in his eyes softened into a quiet, profound gratitude. I watched from a distance, my arms crossed, and a strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't pity. It was ... recognition, a reflection of my own struggles, my own loneliness. In that moment, we were just two strangers sharing the same quiet emptiness, now sitting in the same warm light. After a few minutes, he set the spoon down. The thunder outside rumbled, and he looked up at me, his voice quiet but clear. "You don't know what you just did for me. I thought tonight would be my last night alive." I froze. The words hit me like a physical blow. Something about his raw honesty shattered the walls I had built around my own heart. I walked closer and put a napkin on the table just to do something with my hands. "What's your name?" I asked. "Daniel." he replied. I nodded. I'm Clara. He offered a weak smile. That's a beautiful name. I returned the smile, though I could feel my own eyes glistening. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Two people wounded by life and forgotten by the world, finding a rare sacred connection in a small roadside diner. When Daniel finished his meal, he stood up slowly. "Thank you," he said again, his voice thick with emotion. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an old, forgotten umbrella. "It's still raining. Take this. It's not much, but it's something." He took it from my hand so carefully, as if it were a priceless treasure. "Thank you, Clara," he said, his eyes shining. "I won't forget this." And with that, he turned and stepped back out into the storm. The door closed, leaving me alone with the sound of the rain and my own thumping heart. I stared at the door for a long time, an ache settling in my chest that I couldn't quite name. A deep feeling inside told me this wasn't the end of our story, and I was right. Because the very next morning, everything was about to change. That man, Daniel, the one who had asked for nothing more than leftovers, would return. But he wouldn't be a stranger. He would be the person who held the power to transform my life forever. Thank you so much for watching it. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more content that we hope will inspire and move you. See you next time. Have you ever witnessed a moment that cuts right through all the noise and chaos of the world? A moment of pure, raw humanity? Picture this. A torrential downpour, the kind that seems to wash the world clean, but also chills you to the bone. It's late, the streets are empty, and a small cozy diner is about to close for the night. Inside, Clara is wiping down the last table, her movements tired but methodical. The rain hammers against the windows, a dramatic soundtrack to the end of a long day. Suddenly, the bell above the door jingles, a sound so unexpected it makes her jump. Standing in the doorway is a man, soaked to the skin, shivering not just from the cold, but from something deeper. He doesn't say a word, he just looks at her, and in his eyes, Clara sees not a threat, but a reflection of the world's harsh indifference. It's a look of pure desperation, a silent plea for survival that bypasses all her defenses. In that single heavy moment, Clara doesn't see a stranger. She sees a soul fighting to hold on. Fear, caution, the late hour, none of it matters. Without a second thought, she turns and walks straight to the kitchen. The air hangs with the familiar sense of her diner, a mix of old grease, cleaning supplies, and the lingering warm aroma of spices. She finds the large pot from that afternoon's special. Inside are the last remnants of a hearty vegetable soup, still warm. She ladles a generous portion into a ceramic bowl, the steam instantly rising, a small cloud of warmth in the cool kitchen air. Next, she grabs a piece of fresh, soft bread from a paper bag, the bread she'd saved for her own breakfast the next morning. Her actions are swift, efficient, driven by an instinct that years of her own struggles could never erase. It's a memory, perhaps, of her own mother's quiet generosity. A lesson learned long ago that kindness is a currency far more valuable than money. She returns to the dining area, the steaming bowl held carefully in her hands. The man, Daniel, hasn't moved. He's still dripping onto the worn floor, his eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and a flicker of newfound hope. He looks like a cornered animal, ready to bolt, embarrassed by his own vulnerability. Clara offers him a gentle smile, one that reaches her eyes, carrying no pity, only genuine warmth. She places the bowl and the bread on a small, clean table by the window. The soft clatter of the ceramic on the tabletop breaks the night's heavy silence. The rich, savory aroma of the hot soup fills the space, a stark, comforting contrast to the biting cold outside. "Here you go," she says, her voice soft but firm, cutting through his shame. She gestures to the chair. "It's piping hot. Please sit down. Eat slowly." Her tone isn't that of a waitress to a customer. It's the voice of one human being offering sanctuary to another. She doesn't wait for a thank you. She simply steps back, giving him the space to accept her gift. As Daniel slowly, hesitantly takes a seat, you realize what's just happened. This isn't just about a bowl of soup. Clara's small act of selfless charity has offered something far more nourishing, a moment of dignity in a world that had seemingly stripped him of everything else. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the simplest gestures hold the greatest power. A bowl of soup can be a lifeline. A warm smile can be a beacon. This story makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world that often feels cold and indifferent, what if we were all a little more like Clara? What if we chose to see the person instead of the problem? True strength isn't about how much we can take for ourselves, but how much we can give to others, especially when they have nothing to offer in return. It's in these quiet moments, these uncelebrated acts of kindness, that we find the very best of our humanity. It's a reminder that we all have the power to be a light for someone lost in the storm. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this moment with me. If this story touched your heart, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more content that explores the beauty of the human spirit. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced or witnessed a similar act of kindness? Share your story with us. Until next time, take care and spread a little warmth wherever you go. As Clara placed the steaming soup and bread on the table, the quiet connection between her and Daniel was shattered. The diner was almost empty, but the few remaining patrons weren't just watching, they were judging. A palpable wave of disapproval, colder than the rain outside, washed over the room. A man at the counter stopped counting his change, his eyes narrowing as he took in Daniel's tattered coat and desperate face. His look held no curiosity, only swift, complete condemnation. He saw a disruption, not a person. He finished paying, but before leaving, he leaned towards the cook, Gus, and muttered just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Is she actually serving a beggar? That's ridiculous." This is a restaurant, not a shelter. We pay good money to eat here. His voice dripped with arrogance, equating Daniel's poverty with filth. A woman in a nearby booth chimed in with a sneer, shaking her head in disgust. To them, their comfort was being sacrificed for someone they deemed unworthy. The murmurs and stares were a physical force, drawing a sharp line between the housed and the homeless, the privileged and the destitute. Daniel felt it most acutely. He flinched, shrinking into his wet coat, his shame burning under their hostile glares. It was the crushing weight of being invisible until suddenly you're a spectacle of scorn. But Clara, she heard everything and absorbed nothing. Her expression remained serene, her attention laser-focused on the trembling man before her. The whispers, the judgmental glances, they were just background noise. The predictable soundtrack of a world that values appearance over empathy. She didn't spare them a single glance. Her mission wasn't to maintain appearances or uphold social rules. Her mission was to feed a hungry person. She didn't serve status. She served people. Her silent defiance was a powerful statement. That night, her small diner wasn't defined by its menu prices, but by the compassion it dared to show. Daniel's need was more real, more vital than any customer's fleeting discomfort. In the heart of the storm, amidst the rhythmic drumming of rain against the window pane, a story of quiet desperation and profound kindness unfolded. Tonight, we delve into a tale that reminds us of the power of a simple act, a moment of connection in a world that often feels disconnected. This is the story of Daniel and Clara, a story that will touch your soul. The bell above the diner door chimed, a small, hopeful sound against the fury of the storm. In stepped Daniel, a figure seemingly carved from the night itself, drenched and shivering. He was more than just cold. He was a man hollowed out by hardship, his eyes carrying the heavy weight of countless unseen struggles. He lingered by the entrance, a ghost at the feast, his presence a stark contrast to the warm, inviting glow of the small establishment. Most people would have turned away, their comfort disturbed by this intrusion of the harsh world outside. But Clara, the diner's owner, saw something else. She didn't see a nuisance or a threat. She saw a human being in need. With a warmth that defied the storm raging both outside and within Daniel, she approached him. Her voice was gentle, a stark contrast to the harsh judgments he had grown accustomed to. "Come in from the cold," she said, her words a lifeline. "Let me get you something hot." She led him to a small, secluded booth, a haven of privacy in the sparsely populated diner. The simple gesture of being guided, of being treated with care, was foreign to Daniel. He sat down, his movements stiff, as if he had forgotten how to accept comfort. He watched, almost in disbelief, as Clara returned not with a demand or a suspicious glance, but with a steaming bowl of soup and a basket of warm, crusty bread. The aroma alone was a forgotten luxury, a scent from a life he once knew. Daniel ate, slowly, deliberately. Each spoonful was more than just food. It was an anchor, tethering him to the world of the living. The frantic, gnawing hunger that had been his constant companion for so long began to recede, replaced by a deep, resonant warmth that spread through his chilled limbs. The steam rising from the bowl seemed to soften the hard edges of the despair that had encased his heart for months. It was a physical manifestation of hope. As he ate, a profound wave of emotion washed over him. It wasn't just the relief from hunger. It was the shock of being seen, truly seen, as a person worthy of decency, under the judgmental glares of the few other customers. Clara's unwavering, kind focus was a spotlight that pierced through the walls he had meticulously built around his broken spirit. In that moment, those walls crumbled. Tears began to trace silent paths down his stubbled cheeks, mingling with the rain still dripping from his hair. He made no sound, no dramatic gesture. He simply let them fall, a quiet, cleansing release of the immense pressure that life had forced upon him. It was the sorrow of his journey and the overwhelming gratitude for this unexpected sanctuary. Clara watched from a respectful distance, understanding that this was a private, sacred moment. She saw the quiet dignity in his sadness and knew that her simple meal was healing, something far deeper than his empty stomach. The bowl was finally empty, wiped clean with the last crumb of bread. Daniel placed the spoon down gently, the soft click against the ceramic a punctuation mark on his moment of reprieve. He stood up slowly, a flicker of restored energy steadying the tremor in his hands. He straightened his worn coat, a small, futile attempt to reclaim a sliver of the respectability he felt he had lost so long ago. He was no longer just a shadow. He walked over to the counter where Clara was quietly working. He stopped in front of her, and for the first time, his eyes, though still lined with pain, held a luminous sincerity. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice a low, gravelly whisper, thick with unspoken emotion. He had said those words countless times for small handouts, but this was different. This wasn't a transaction. It felt like a debt of the soul. He hesitated, gathering his strength. "You have no idea," he began again, his voice gaining a fraction of its former strength. "No idea what you just did for me tonight. No one has looked at me, truly seen me, with such dignity and kindness in a very, very long time." His words carried the weight of a man who had been invisible for too long, whose existence had been reduced to a whisper in the wind. Clara's simple act of kindness had restored his humanity in a moment when he was on the verge of surrendering it completely. Clara simply nodded, her own eyes glistening. Words were unnecessary. Their shared humanity spoke volumes. He lingered for a moment more, soaking in the light and warmth of the diner and of her presence. It was a memory he would carry with him, a beacon in the darkness. Then, with a final, appreciative nod, he turned, pushed open the door, and disappeared back into the stormy night. He left behind only a lingering dampness on the floor and the profound silence of a life irrevocably touched But in that silence, a powerful message remained. Kindness is never a small act. It can be the one thing that saves a soul from the storm. It's a reminder that seeing the person behind the circumstance can change a life. Thank you for joining us for this story. If it touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more content that explores the depth and beauty of the human spirit. Remember to look for the Daniels in your own life and perhaps be the Clara they need. Until next time, take care and spread kindness. The next morning dawned with a tentative stillness. The relentless rain of the previous night had finally ceased, leaving the streets slick and clean under a sky that was still bruised with grey, but promising a break. Clara arrived at the diner, Sabor and Sia, exactly on time, carrying the usual weary weight of another long shift ahead. She pushed open the glass door and stepped inside, the familiar chime signaling her entrance. She was ready for the routine, punching in, tying her apron, and beginning the Sisyphean task of setting tables and preparing coffee. Yet, before she even reached the time clock, she sensed a profound, unsettling difference in the atmosphere. The diner felt charged, humming with an energy that was anything but routine. Her eyes immediately swept the street, drawn by an instinct that something was deeply wrong. The sight that greeted her outside was jarringly out of place. Parked directly in front of the humble storefront and lining the curb nearby were several sleek, black luxury cars models that looked expensive enough to buy the entire diner 10 times over. Their polished surfaces gleamed faintly in the weak morning light, broadcasting an undeniable aura of wealth and serious business. It was like seeing a fleet of sharks in a koi, pond-aggressive, powerful, and utterly out of place. Clara had seen her share of strange things working the early shift, but this was a different league entirely. These weren't just nice cars. They were statements. The disruption wasn't confined to the exterior. Inside the small dining area, usually a refuge of quiet, early morning solitude, was a hub of discreet activity. Several men in impeccably tailored suits, the kind that screamed CEO or corporate lawyer, were moving with focused intensity. They spoke quietly into mobile phones, their expressions grave and professional, their expensive leather briefcases resting on the seats or held tightly in hand. They didn't look like customers. They looked like they owned the place, or were about to. Their presence sucked the air out of the room, replacing the comforting smell of old coffee and frying bacon with the sharp, metallic scent of money and power. They moved with a quiet confidence that made Clara feel like an intruder in her own workplace. At the center of this unusual spectacle was Mr. Eduardo, the diner's manager, a man whose baseline state was usually one of comfortable indifference. This morning, however, he was a coiled spring of nerves. He was pacing rapidly between the counter and the kitchen doorway, his hair slightly disheveled, his tie crooked. He kept adjusting his glasses and wiping his sweaty palms on his apron, his voice a low, anxious murmur as he spoke to one of the suited men. His customary air of low-level exasperation had been replaced by outright terrified deference. He looked less like a manager and more like a man about to face a firing squad. Clara had never seen him so flustered, not even the time the health inspector made a surprise visit or when the grease trap overflowed. Clara paused, her hand still resting on the door handle. It was as if she had stepped into the wrong Bildinger high-stakes meeting, had somehow hijacked the small, unassuming corner she knew as her workplace. The tension was palpable, thick with money and corporate weight. It was a silent, suffocating pressure that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. She glanced over at Gus, the cook, who was staring out from the pass-through window with a bewildered look that mirrored her own. His mouth was slightly agape, his spatula held forgotten in mid-air. His expression asked the same question, screaming in her mind, "What in the world is going on?" Whatever was happening, it was clearly monumental. This wasn't about a missed delivery or a broken coffee machine. This felt ... bigger, life-altering. She quickly hung up her coat. The strange scene compelling her forward, curiosity overriding her exhaustion. She had to know. She had to understand what brought this battalion of corporate soldiers to their humble little diner on a Tuesday morning. What connection could this influx of power and wealth possibly have with their small, struggling diner? The morning, she realized with a jolt of adrenaline, was going to be anything but normal. As she tied the strings of her apron, the simple, familiar action felt like arming herself for a battle she didn't understand. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward the counter, ready to face whatever new reality had just crashed into her life. The quiet routine she had craved was shattered, and in its place was a mystery she was now a part of. The air crackled with unspoken words and hidden agendas, and Clara was standing right in the middle of it all, wondering if this was the beginning of the end or the start of something she could never have imagined. The nervous energy that had been thrumming through the diner suddenly hit a fever pitch. As I watched the manager, Mr. Eduardo, fumbling with a set of keys, his hands shaking, the front door swung open once more. It was a sound that made every single person in the room, the men in suits, the jumpy manager, and me snap our heads toward the entrance. And there he was. The man who stepped across the threshold was, without a doubt, the same man from the rain-soaked night before. But he seemed like a completely different person. The desperate, slumped figure I had helped was gone. In his place stood a man who radiated a quiet power and impeccable taste. He was dressed in a pristine, dark suit that fit him perfectly, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. His hair was neatly styled, his face clean-shaven, revealing strong, defined features that had been hidden by exhaustion and grime. His posture was straight and firm, exuding an air of confident command. But the most striking thing of all was his eyes. The hollow, defeated look was gone. Now they held a serene, intensely focused gaze, the gaze of someone who was entirely in control of his world. The moment he entered, the bustling corporate energy in the diner just stopped. The suited men, who had seemed so important just moments before, snapped to attention. Their entire demeanor shifted from high-powered professionals to respectful subordinates. Mr. Eduardo, upon seeing him, nearly dropped the keys he was holding, his jaw practically hitting the floor in a perfect picture of astonishment and terror. The Mandanil took a measured, deliberate step forward. His eyes immediately found mine. A slight, knowing smile played on his lips, a look that seemed to hold both deep gratitude and a gentle amusement. He completely ignored the manager's stammering attempt at a greeting and walked directly toward the counter where I stood, clutching my apron in my hands, my mind reeling. I was speechless, trying to connect the starving man from last night with this powerful executive standing before me. "Good morning, Clara," he said. His voice was strong and resonant now, carrying the natural authority of a leader. The sound of my name, spoken with such clarity and warmth, cut right through the tension in the room. He paused, letting the dramatic silence hang in the air, allowing the sheer magnitude of the change to fully register with everyone. Then he delivered the incredible truth. Last night I was, shall we say, disguised. He looked at me, a hint of a story in his eyes. It was an experiment, one born out of great personal loss and a desperate need to test a crucial hypothesis. His gaze swept briefly over the stunned faces of the other men and the terrified manager, then settled back on me, his expression softening again. "My name is Daniel Moreira. I own this entire chain of diners and restaurants, including Sabor and Sia." My heart stopped. I felt the floor drop out from under me. He owned this place. He owned all of them. He continued, his voice steady. After losing everything personal to me, I had also lost faith in humanity. I needed to know if true, uncalculated goodness still existed in this world, and I wanted to find it in the very corners of the business I built. I wanted to experience utter rejection, just to see if anyone at all, would still choose kindness. He took one more step closer, his eyes locking with mine in a way that felt profound, almost intimate. "And only you, Clara. Only you offered help." His voice was filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place, a mix of awe and relief. "You saw a man, not an inconvenience. You offered food, dignity, and hope, without asking for a single thing in return. Your simple gesture," he said, his voice lowering slightly, "confirmed that the flame of human compassion is not yet extinguished." The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap, shattering the ordinary reality of the diner. In that moment, I knew, deep in my bones, that this was the beginning of a whole new life. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more content that explores the power of human kindness. We'll see you in the next one. Clara stood there, frozen. It was like the world had just tilted on its axis. The shivering, broken man she had helped just last night. He was Daniel, the owner of the entire company, the very ground she was standing on. Suddenly, everything clicked into place, the frantic energy in the diner, Mr. Eduardo's panic, the line of polished black cars outside. It all made a terrifying, perfect kind of sense. The weight of her simple act of kindness felt enormous now, its consequences stretching out before her, vast and life-altering. All she could do was stare at Daniel, the shock having stolen her voice, her breath, her ability to think. Tears welled up in her eyes, not the quiet, sad tears of the night before, but a sudden, blinding flood of hope and disbelief. Daniel watched her, his expression full of gentle understanding. He knew this was a lot to take in, so he gave her a moment, letting the truth settle. Then he reached into the inner pocket of his impeccably tailored suit jacket and pulled out a thick, crisp white envelope. He held it out to her, his hand steady and sure. "Clara," he said, his voice softer now but carrying a weight that made every word feel important. "The food you gave me last night, that was a temporary fix. But what you truly gave me was a reason to live. You gave me the clarity to start over, the motivation to clean up my life and to fix my business." He placed the envelope into her trembling hands. The paper felt heavy, like it was filled with destiny itself. "Consider this a thank you," he continued, "an immediate investment and an offer. Inside that envelope, you'll find a significant financial bonus. It's more than enough to change your circumstances overnight." He paused, and his gaze seemed to look right into her soul. But more importantly, you'll find a letter of appointment. Effective immediately. You are the new manager of this unit. He glanced over at the terrified manager, Mr. Eduardo, who looked like he was trying to become one with the wall. "Mr. Eduardo," Daniel said pointedly, "will be reassigned to a role where compassion is less of a requirement." The words hit Clara like a physical force. Manager her, the tired waitress who spent her nights cleaning up spills and dreaming of a tiny raise, was now being offered a position of respect, of authority. It was unthinkable. Daniel stepped a little closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I need people like you leading my companies, Clara. People who see the human being before the profit margin. I want you to lead with that generous heart of yours. I want you to make sure that this dinnerand, every place you touch, never loses its capacity for genuine, unconditional kindness." That was it. She couldn't hold it back any longer. The silent tears flowed freely down her cheeks. She clutched the envelope to her chest, her knuckles turning white. She tried to say something, anything, but the words were stuck in her throat, coming out only as a choked, overwhelmed whisper. She hadn't planned this. She never expected a reward or this kind of recognition. All she had done was follow her heart. In a world where every action seems to be measured by what you can get in return, she had acted out of pure, simple empathy. And that one selfless act had completely, irrevocably changed the course of her entire life. It was a powerful reminder, a profound testament to a simple truth. Sometimes the greatest returns come from the investments we make with no expectation of profit at all. Thank you so much for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content that celebrates the power of kindness. We'll see you in the next video. The silence that fell over the diner was so deep you could almost hear it. It was a stark contrast to the tense corporate air that had filled the room just moments before. Clara held the envelope tightly in her hands, a physical symbol of a future she never thought possible. She looked across the table at Daniel, but she wasn't seeing the powerful businessman anymore. She saw the man whose life she had, without knowing, saved just the night before. The true weight of their meeting finally settled on them both. It was a powerful lesson in how we see people, a sharp critique of the shallow judgments our society so often makes. The few customers who had sneered at Daniel's appearance, and Mr. Eduardo, the manager who so spectacularly failed the hidden test, they had all been blinded by the surface. All they saw was a tattered coat, wet hair, and what looked like desperate poverty. They completely missed the man underneath, the successful, insightful owner of the very company that owned this diner. More than that, they missed the wounded soul who was testing the moral fiber of the world around him. It is a sad truth that so many people are content to judge others by what they wear or how much money they seem to have. Very few have the clarity, or maybe just the compassion, to look deeper, to actually see the person. Daniel's disguise had been a perfect filter. It neatly separated those who value image from those who value humanity. Clara had seen the desperation, of course, but she responded to something more fundamental. A quiet dignity, a shared human experience of suffering. She looked right past his temporary appearance and recognized the universal ache of loneliness and hunger. She didn't need to see his credentials or his bank account to offer him a safe space. All she needed was a heartbeat. And in that one simple, unassuming act offering, a bowl of hot soup and a piece of bread. With no strings attached, she didn't just sustain a life. She redirected to destinies her own future. Once a path of endless, weary work was now filled with purpose and authority. And Daniel's path, which was leading toward self-destruction and despair, was now pointed toward renewed hope. He found a firm commitment to rebuild not just his company, but his life with a brand new moral foundation. As if on cue, the sun finally broke through the heavy clouds outside, casting a warm, clean light across the diner floor. It seemed to illuminate the profound truth of the moment. The greatest currency we have is kindness, and the most powerful force in the universe is empathy. Because sometimes a simple bowl of soup, a single moment of uncalculated compassion, is all it takes to mend a broken soul and, in doing so, forever change the course of two lives. What Daniel did next was a testament to his newfound perspective. He didn't just reward Clara, he decided to reshape his entire company. He called a board meeting the very next day. The atmosphere was electric. The executives, including the now infamous Mr. Eduardo, were expecting a routine quarterly review. They had no idea their world was about to be turned upside down. Daniel walked in, not in his usual tailored suit, but in a simple, clean outfit that spoke of humility, not power. He began by telling them the story of the previous night, without naming names at first. He described a man, down on his luck, seeking a moment of warmth in one of their establishments. He painted a vivid picture of the scorn, the judgment, and the ultimate refusal of service. You could see the discomfort ripple through the room. Then he introduced Clara, not as a waitress, but as the new vice president of operations. The shock was palpable. Mr. Eduardo's face went pale. Daniel explained that the company's new mission wouldn't just be about profit margins, but about people. He announced the Clara Initiative, a company-wide policy ensuring that every establishment would provide a warm meal to anyone in need, no questions asked. It was a radical idea, a complete shift from their purely commercial focus. He declared that true success isn't just measured in dollars, but in the positive impact we have on our community. He wanted his company to be known not just for its brand, but for its heart. Clara, standing beside him, wasn't just a symbol of this change. She was going to be the one to lead it. Her first-hand experience with both hardship and compassion made her the perfect person to oversee this new direction. The old guard, the executives who only saw bottom lines, were given a choice: adapt to this new, more humane vision, or leave. Many were stunned, but some were inspired. A new culture began to form right there in that boardroom, one built on the simple principle that had saved Daniel's life. Empathy is the best investment. In the weeks that followed, the change was real. Diners and restaurants under the company's umbrella began to transform. They became more than just places to eat. They became community hubs, places of refuge. Clara, with her quiet strength and deep understanding of people, thrived in her new role. She implemented training programs that taught employees to see the person, not the customer. She worked tirelessly, fueled by the memory of her own struggles and the incredible turn her life had taken. Daniel, for his part, found a new kind of peace. He was still a businessman, but his work now had a deeper meaning. He and Clara often met for coffee, not as boss and employee, but as partners and friends, united by a shared experience that had changed them both forever. They had learned that a business can have a soul, and that sometimes the most profitable thing you can do is to simply be kind. The diner where it all began became a flagship for this new philosophy, a constant reminder that a single bowl of soup, offered with an open heart, can nourish much more than just the body. It can heal a soul, rebuild a life, and even reshape the world, one small act of kindness at a time. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more content that celebrates the best of humanity. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video.